The sound of a 12-cylinder marine diesel engine dying is distinct. It doesn't just stop. It coughs a wet metallic rattle deep in its throat before the silence rushes in to crush you. I knew that sound. I knew the vibration that preceded it, the subtle shudder in the deck plating that most people mistook for waves. But standing on the aft deck of the Lady Grace, surrounded by panic, I let the shouting wash past me. My eyes went to the panel by the hatch, tack needles sagging, oil pressure bleeding down. I dropped a knee to the deck palm flat and felt the vibration fade unevenly. Starboard, still coasting, port gone dead. I listened for the starter click that never came. No speeches, just numbers sound and what the metal was telling me. The captain was shouting orders that didn't matter. The tourists on the upper deck were murmuring, their champagne glasses clinking nervously. But my eyes were on the woman storming toward the engine room hatch. She wasn't shouting. She cut through the cluster of crew and passengers' shoulders, squared eyes fixed on the hatch wheel like it was the only thing that mattered. She stepped around spilled champagne and a dropped life jacket without breaking stride. I checked my watch. 4:12 p.m. The tide was turning in 20 minutes. If the port engine didn't fire, the current would drag this 60-footer right into the concrete piling of Pier 40. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't ask for permission. I stepped into her path, blocking the hatch. "Get out of my way," she said. Her voice was low, scraped raw by stress. She was older than me, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe knot that was starting to fray at the temples. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently burning with a mixture of fury and despair. "You go down there in that dress, you'll ruin the silk and you won't fix the fuel injection," I said, my voice steady, pitched to cut through the wind without yelling. "The number 4 injector line is cracked. I can smell the raw diesel from here. You don't need a captain. You need a wrench and a bypass line." She stopped, her chest heaving slightly. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. She didn't see a random passenger. She saw the grease under my fingernails, the heavy boots, the way I was standing, balanced against the roll of the dead ship. "Who are you?" she asked. "Javier Collins. I specialize in catastrophic marine failure. Do you want to hit the pier, or do you want me to go down there?" She hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then she stepped back. "You have 10 minutes before we drift into the exclusion zone." "I only need 8. I slid down the ladder into the heat and noise of the engine room. It was my world. The air was thick with oil and heat, a sensory blanket that calmed my racing mind. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I moved with economy. I found the cracked line, isolated the valve, and jury-rigged a bypass using a spare hose I found clamped to the bulkhead. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it was a negotiation with physics. I was trading longevity for immediate survival. I wiped my hands on a rag and signaled the engineer to turn it over. The engine caught with a roar, the vibration returning to the deck plates, steady, rhythmic, alive. When I climbed back up, the Lady Grace was powering away from the pier, cutting a clean wake through the harbor. The woman was waiting for me. The wind had pulled a few strands of hair loose across her face. The relief in her shoulders was palpable, but she was holding it back, keeping her back straight, even while her hand shook around the bottle who had won a skirmish but was losing the war. "You were right," she said, handing me a bottle of water. "Number 4 injector. It's a common failure point on these older cat diesels if the vibration dampeners are worn," I said, cracking the seal and taking a long drink. "Your dampeners are shot. You're running on borrowed time." "I know," she said, looking out at the gray water of the harbor. "I'm Valentina Lewis. I own this boat, and the 2 broken ones back at the dock." I know who you are, I said. Everyone in the port knew the Lewis fleet. It was a heritage brand currently bleeding into the water, circled by sharks. I also know you have a Coast Guard inspection coming up in 2 weeks. She flinched. It was small, a tightening of her jaw, but I saw it. That's private information. It's public record when you file for an extension, I corrected gently. And you won't get another one. She turned to face me fully, her eyes searching mine. Why are you here, Mr. Collins? You're not a tourist? No. I was hired by your Uncle Marcus to assess the fleet's scrap value. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath the tan. Marcus sent you? He did. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so the crew wouldn't hear. He wants me to write a report saying these engines are beyond repair. He wants to prove that the cost of fixing them exceeds the value of the business, so he can force a sale of the land. And are you going to... She crossed her arms, locking her posture. Are you going to write it? The engines are tired, Valentina. They've been neglected. I paused, letting the weight of the truth sit between us. Then I pulled a folded schematic from my back pocket, not the one Marcus gave me, but one I had sketched during the ride out. But they have good bones. Cast iron blocks. You can't kill them easily. I can rebuild the port engine on the Audacity and the Grace within 6 weeks. I can get you through that inspection. She stared at me, confusion, warring with hope. Why would you do that? Marcus is paying you. Marcus pays for an assessment. He doesn't pay for my integrity. I looked her in the eye. I don't like seeing good machinery scrapped for a quick buck. And I don't like bullies. I can't pay you what he pays, she said, her voice quiet. My liquidity is complicated. I know. He's withholding the maintenance funds from the trust. Isn't he starving the beast so it dies faster? She looked shocked that I knew the exact leverage being used against her. How do you know that? Because that's how I would do it if I wanted to break you. I offered a small, dry smile. I'm a negotiator, Valentina. I understand leverage. Right now you have none. Let me give you some. How? Hire me as an independent contractor. Defer payment until you pass inspection and the charter season opens. Once you're operational, Marcus loses his argument for insolvency. You'd work on contingency. I'd work on the belief that you're too stubborn to let this company fail. She studied me for a long silence. The boat rocked gently beneath us. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the calculation of risk versus survival. Finally, she extended a hand. Her grip was firm, her palm rougher than I expected. Start tomorrow, she said. But Javier, if you betray me, I won't just fire you. I'll drown you. Understood, I said. 0700. Don't be late. The Lewis boatyard was a graveyard of good intentions. Rusted winches lay in the tall grass, and the smell of creosote and old diesel hung heavy in the air. The main hangar where the Audacity sat dry-docked was a cathedral of shadows and dust. For the first week, it was just me and the machine. I stripped the massive V12 down to the block. I labeled every bolt, every gasket, laying them out on clean tarps like surgical instruments. My process was my religion. Chaos was the enemy. If you control the parts, you control the outcome. Valentina was there every day. She didn't hover, but she didn't leave. She set up a makeshift office on a folding table near the bow, surrounded by stacks of paper invoices, legal threats, Coast Guard compliance forms. I watched her from the engine bay. I saw the way she rubbed her left temple when she was on the phone with the bank. I saw the way she drank her coffee black, grimacing at the bitterness but needing the caffeine. I saw how she spoke to the few remaining crew members with respect, asking about their families even when I knew she wasn't sure if she could make payroll. She was fighting a war on two fronts, the mechanical decay in the hangar, and the legal decay in the boardroom. On Tuesday of the second week, the first real skirmish happened. I was deep inside the crankcase, measuring bearing clearances, when I heard the heavy slam of a car door. Then a voice booming jovial false. "Val, my God, this place looks like a tomb." I wiped the grease from my hands and climbed up the ladder. Marcus Lewis was a big man in a suit that cost more than my truck. He was standing by Valentina's table, looming over her. She was seated, which put her at a disadvantage. "It's a workshop, Marcus," she said, not looking up from her ledger. "Work is messy." "It's a money pit," he said, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "I saw the invoice for the new cylinder liners. Are you insane? We have a buyer for the land, Val, a developer. They want to sign next week. I'm not selling. You don't have a choice. The trust documents state that if the fleet isn't seaworthy by the fiscal quarter, close the executor, that's me, has the duty to liquidate assets to preserve capital." He squeezed her shoulder. It wasn't a comfort. It was a pin. "Give it up, sweetheart. Go find a husband. Let the men handle the business." I saw Valentina's pen snap in her hand. Ink bled onto her fingers. I didn't shout. I walked over, picking up a heavy torque wrench from the bench as I moved. I didn't raise it. I just held it at my side, a 3-foot bar of chrome vanadium steel. "You're in a hard hat area," I said, my voice conversational. Marcus turned, startled. He looked me up and down, sneering. "And who is this, the grease monkey?" "I'm the lead technical consultant," I said. "And per OSHA regulations, unauthorized personnel are a liability. If you slip on an oil patch and break your neck, Valentina's insurance premiums go up. We can't afford that." "I own a portion of this yard." Marcus spat. "Actually," I said, stepping between him and Valentina, forcing him to release her shoulder to back up. "You own shares in the holding company. The physical site is under the jurisdiction of the operational manager for safety compliance. That's me. And right now, you're a hazard." I looked him in the eye. I was calm. I was breathing slow. I was the rock. He was the storm, blustering and chaotic. "Get out," I said, softly. He looked at the wrench. He looked at my face. He adjusted his tie, scoffed, and turned to Valentina. "This isn't over. I'm freezing the operating account tomorrow. Good luck buying those liners with zero cash flow." He stormed out. Valentina let out a breath that sounded like a sob, but when I turned to her, her eyes were dry. She was staring at her ink-stained hand. "He's right," she whispered. "He controls the bank mandate. If he freezes the account, we can't buy the parts. The engine stays in pieces. We fail inspection." I put the wrench down. I took a rag from my pocket and gently, carefully wiped the ink from her fingers. She didn't pull away. Her hand was trembling. "We don't need the account," I said. "Parts cost money, Javier. Real money." I nodded once, like she'd stated gravity. "Agreed," I said. "So we stop improvising and we put it in writing." I pulled a small field notebook from my back pocket and flipped to a clean page. I wrote 3 bullet points slow enough for her to read. 1 parts, 2 paper. 3 pressure. Parts I call my supplier in Oakland. Net 60 terms, but only if there's a signed work order and a delivery address on record. No cash up front, I said. Paper you countersign a scope sheet tonight. Labor hours parts list and a simple contingency clause. If you pass inspection, my invoice becomes due on the first charter deposit. If you don't, you owe nothing beyond the parts cost on the net terms. I said. That keeps this clean. No favors, no leverage games. Pressure Marcus wants you alone and starving. So tomorrow you're not alone. We put your bank on notice that any freeze triggers a safety risk to vessels in dry dock. We make it their problem, not yours." Valentina stared at the page like it was oxygen. "You can actually do that?" she asked. "I can do the part I control," I said. "I don't threaten people. I document them." I tore the page out, folded it once, and handed it to her. "Keep it. If your lawyer wants to rewrite it, fine. The point is we move like professionals. I have a supplier in Oakland. He owes me a favor from a job I did on a tugboat last year. He has remanufactured liners. I can get them on credit net 60 terms." I didn't leave it as a promise. I stepped outside the hangar where the reception was better, put my back to the truck, and called the number I kept for emergencies. "Ochoa Industrial." A gravelly voice answered. "Luis, it's Collins. I need 4 Riemann liners for a V12 overnight freight." "This isn't negotiable," I said. A pause, then a low whistle. "That's a lot of metal. And it's a lot of dock time if we miss inspection. I'll send the serials and the purchase order in 5 minutes. Net 60. You'll have a signed work order from the owner on file," I said. "You're good for it?" "I'm good for it," I said. "And you'll be paid before day 60. Put it in writing and email me the invoice today." When I walked back in, Valentina was watching me like she'd just seen the shape of the exit door. I forwarded the confirmation to her and to the attorney email she kept in her contacts. No speeches, just paper. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Why would you do that? You're taking on debt for me." "Not for you," I said. "For the job. It's a beautiful machine, Valentina. It deserves to run." It wasn't the whole truth. I wanted to see the pressure come off her shoulders, but I wasn't going to say that out loud. "How do people fall in love?" she asked, suddenly, the question hanging in the dusty air. It wasn't flirtatious, it was exhausted. I looked at the grease on my hands and then at the determined line of her jaw. "Usually," I said, "by showing up, over and over. When it's convenient and especially when it's not." She held my gaze for a long moment. "Thank you for showing up, Javier." The weeks blurred into a rhythm of exhaustion and progress. We fell into a domestic routine within the hangar. I would arrive at 600, and the coffee would already be brewing dark roast, just how I liked it. She had learned. That same week, the rebuilt port engine finally held a clean idle underload. I watched the gauges stay where they belonged, temp stable, pressure steady, while the hull hummed instead of shuddered. Valentina didn't celebrate. She just rested her fingertips on the bulkhead, nodded once, and kept pouring the coffee like we had someplace to be. In return, I started fixing the small things. The heater in her office that rattled, I stripped the fan motor and lubricated the bearings. Silence. The door that stuck, I planed the edge. One afternoon, about 4 weeks in, the pressure was becoming suffocating. The inspection was 10 days away. We were waiting for the cylinder heads to come back from the machine shop. Valentina was vibrating with anxiety, pacing the concrete floor. "Stop," I said. "I can't. If the heads are warped, they aren't. I checked them myself." I wiped my hands. "Get in the truck. What, we have work to do? We're waiting on parts. You're useless to me right now because you're spinning out. Get in the truck." I drove us away from the harbor, away from the smell of diesel, to a park by a small pond above the harbor. It was green quiet and removed from the war zone. We sat on a bench. I was in a plain gray t-shirt and work jeans, still smelling faintly of diesel. I had bought a bag of birdseed from a vendor. "This is ridiculous," she said, sitting stiffly. "I have a meeting with the union rep in an hour." "You have 40 minutes, I said. I poured a handful of seed into her hand. "Feed the birds. Javier. Feed them, watch them. They have a system. The bold ones eat first, but the patient ones get the most. She sighed, the sound long and ragged, and held out her hand. A flurry of white doves descended. She flinched at first, then froze. The tiny claws on her palm, the flutter of wings, it forced her to be still. It forced her to be present. I watched the tension drain from her neck. The sun was filtering through the trees, dappling her white tank top and dark skirt. She looked lighter for the first time in weeks. "My father used to bring me here," she said quietly, "before the business ate him alive. He told me the sea takes everything eventually." "The sea takes what you don't secure," I said. "That's why we bolt everything down. That's why we check the torque specs." She turned to me, a white dove perched on her knee. "You make it sound so simple. Physics, mechanics, cause and effect. But people aren't like that. Marcus isn't like that." "Marcus is just a rusted bolt," I said. "He's stuck. You can't force him. You have to apply heat or lubricant, or sometimes you just have to cut him off." She laughed, a genuine sound that surprised a dove into flight. "Is that your solution to everything, mechanics?" "It works," I said. I wanted to reach out and tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. My hand twitched in my pocket. I kept it there. "You're doing good, Val. You're holding the line." "I feel like I'm drowning." "You're not," I said. "I've checked the hull. It's sound." She looked at me, and for a second the air between us changed. It wasn't the heat of a romance novel. Her shoulders dropped all at once. She let out a long breath that matched the engine's new steady idle, then stepped in close enough to hand me the rag without asking what it was for. She leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder, just for a second. "Okay," she said, pulling back and dusting the seeds from her skirt. "Back to the grind." But on the drive back, she hummed along to the radio. The midpoint twist hit us on a Thursday. We were reinstalling the cylinder heads. It was delicate work. Torque sequences had to be perfect. We were working in tandem, passing tools without speaking a perfect unit. Then the side door banged open. It wasn't Marcus. It was an inspector from the Environmental Safety Board, flanked by 2 police officers. "Stop work immediately," the inspector barked. I stepped down from the engine block. "What's the problem?" "We received an anonymous tip about illegal dumping of hazardous waste into the harbor drain," the inspector said, waving a clipboard. "We found oil in the storm runoff. We're shutting down the site pending a full soil analysis." "That's impossible," I said. "I personally sealed the drains. We use a reclamation tank." "The samples don't lie. Site is closed. Everyone out." I looked at Valentina. She was white as a sheet. "It's Marcus," she whispered. "He couldn't freeze the money, so he poured oil in the drain." "It's sabotage," I told the inspector. "Let me show you the reclamation logs. Let me show you the tank levels." "Save it for the hearing. Out. Now." Storytime, they evicted us. They padlocked the hangar with the engine exposed, the heads only hand-tight. We stood in the parking lot as the police tape went up. The inspection was in 4 days. A soil analysis would take weeks. It was a checkmate. Marcus didn't even wait an hour. He rolled in with an umbrella and that same expensive suit, smiling like this was a charity event. He stopped just outside the tape so the officers could see him. "Tragic," he said loudly. "I warned her. She hires strangers, and now the state shuts her down." Valentina straightened, but I stepped forward first. "You need to lower your voice," I said. "This is an act of closure. You're trying to influence witnesses." Marcus laughed. "Witnesses? It's oil in a drain. It's incompetence." I reached into my tool bag and pulled out our daily log sheet, already smudged from the hanger. I held it out to the inspector, not to Marcus. Reclamation tank levels, disposal receipts, and the photo of the sealed drain from yesterday. I said, "If you want facts, start there. If you want theater, talk to him." Marcus's smile twitched when the inspector actually took the paper. Valentina moved to my side, shoulder to shoulder. She didn't say a word, but she didn't move away either. Valentina slumped against my truck. She didn't cry. She just looked hollow. "It's over. He won." I looked at the padlock. I looked at the dark sky gathering offshore. A storm was coming, a real one. "No," I said. "It's not over. Javier, we can't go in there. It's a crime scene now." "We need a hearing," I said. "And we need proof it was planted. Did you see the oil sheen in the drain?" "No." I did. It was fresh, and it was red. Red. Marine gears on these old cats run on straight 40-weight engine oil. It's amber. That red puddle is automatic transmission fluid from a car. Her eyes widened. "Marcus drives that vintage Jaguar. It leaks like a sieve." "I need you to get the security footage from the gate," I said. "The police won't pull it for a simple environmental code violation until next week. We need it now." "And what are you going to do?" "I'm going to make some calls. I'm going to get the Coast Guard inspector to meet us here. Not for the boat inspection, for a site safety audit. That's risky. If he sees the mess, he's a sailor, Val. He knows the difference between a spill and a setup." The next 3 days were a blur of sleepless logistics. Valentina fought the digital war, pulling logs, harassing the security company for the footage. I fought the system. I called in every favor I had. I got a private lab to rush the sample test. We met at her apartment at night. It was the first time I'd been in her space. It was neat, sparse, lonely. We ate takeout on the floor, surrounded by papers. "I found it," she said on the third night. She turned her laptop to me. A grainy video from 2 a.m. showed a sedan pulling up to the storm drain. A figure got out and poured a canister into the grate. "Is that Marcus?" I asked. "It's his car. I can't see the face." "It's enough for reasonable doubt," I said. "It's enough to get the seal broken." I didn't leave it as enough. I made it usable. I asked her for 2 things, the raw file and the access log from the security company. While she pulled it, I opened my laptop and started building a clean chain. I exported the clip twice, once in the original format, and once as a simple MP4 for easy viewing. I labeled both with the same timestamp from the gate system. Then I took still frames of the car's plates and the figure's posture at the drain. I saved everything to 2 thumb drives. One went into my glove box, one went into her folder with the trust documents. Redundancy. The same rule as boats. "If anyone asks, we didn't edit a thing," I said. "We only copied it and logged where it came from." She looked at me, her eyes heavy with fatigue. "Why are you doing this, Javier? You could have walked away weeks ago. You haven't been paid a dime." "I told you," I said, stacking the takeout containers. "I don't leave a job unfinished." "Is that all this is, a job?" I paused. The air in the room grew still. I could hear the rain starting to tap against the window. "No," I said. "It's not just a job." I stood up. I wanted to kiss her. God, I wanted to kiss her. But she was vulnerable, tired, and desperate. It would be taking advantage. It would be coercion. "Get some sleep," I said. "Tomorrow is the storm." The storm hit the coast the next morning, a Pacific low-pressure system that turned the sky purple and whipped the harbor into a frenzy. We met the environmental inspector and the Coast Guard officer at the gate. The wind was howling, tearing at the police tape. "This is highly irregular," the inspector shouted over the wind. Just watch the video, Valentina yelled, holding up her tablet in a waterproof case. She didn't wait for permission. She pressed play. She pointed at the car. She pointed at the drain. That is not my crew. That is sabotage. The Coast Guard officer, a grizzly veteran named Captain Holloway, looked at the video and then at the red sheen on the wet asphalt. He looked at me. "Collins," Holloway asked, "you vouching for this rig?" "I am," I said. "The engine is solid. The sight is clean. The oil is foreign." Holloway turned to the environmental inspector. "Open the gate. If that vessel isn't secured, this storm is going to toss it off the blocks. We have a safety emergency that overrides your investigation." It was a loophole. A beautiful, negotiated loophole. We ran into the hangar. The wind was battering the metal roof, sounding like gunfire. The power was out. We were working by flashlight. "We have to torque the heads," I yelled. "If we don't seal the engine, the humidity will rust the cylinder walls instantly." It was a two-person job. I handled the torque wrench. She read the specs and managed the sequence. "Step 1, 40 foot-pounds," she yelled. "Set." I pulled until the wrench clicked. "Step 2, 80 foot-pounds." We moved in a dance of pure competence. Click, turn, click, turn. Outside, the world was ending. Inside, we were building order out of chaos. We were sweaty, covered in grease, shouting numbers at each other. It was the most intimate moment of my life. We finished the last bolt as the roof vent tore off with a screech of metal, letting rain pour onto the concrete floor. But the engine was sealed. It was safe. We collapsed against the workbench, panting. "We did it," she whispered. I looked at her. She had a smudge of grease on her cheek. Her hair was wild. She looked like a warrior queen. "We did," I said. The aftermath was a slow, steady victory. The storm passed. The video evidence forced the environmental board to drop the fines. Marcus blustered, but without the insolvency leverage, the trust couldn't be broken. The Coast Guard inspection was 3 days later. Captain Holloway walked the Audacity with a clipboard. He checked the bilges. He checked the safety gear. Finally, he asked me to start the engine. I climbed into the bridge. Valentina stood on the dock, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. I turned the key. The V-12 roared to life. No rattle, no smoke. Just the deep, thrumming heartbeat of a healthy machine. Holloway listened for a minute. He nodded. He signed the paper. Beat 10, the resolution. The celebration was small. Just the crew, Valentina and me, standing on the stern of the Audacity as the sun went down. She walked over to me. She was holding a folder. "Your check," she said. "Full amount, plus a bonus." I took the folder. I didn't open it. "Thank you." "Javier," she said. The crew had drifted away, giving us space. "The contract is done. You fixed the fleet." I did. "So, what happens now?" I looked at the water. "I have a few offers. A tug company in Seattle, a refit in San Diego." She took a step closer. "Don't go." I turned to her. "Val." "I fired the fleet manager this morning," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were pleading. "I need a partner, someone who knows the machines, someone I can trust with my life." She pulled a second document from the folder. It wasn't a contract for a job. It was a partnership agreement. Equity. Keys to the yard. "I don't want a consultant," she said. "I want you here, every day." I looked at the paper. Then I looked at her. This wasn't about the job. This was her answering the question she asked weeks ago. She was asking me to show up. I took a pen from my pocket. I didn't hesitate. I signed the bottom line right there on the railing in front of the whole harbor. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She smiled a real smile, one that reached her eyes, and stayed there. She didn't jump into my arms. She didn't kiss me dramatically. She simply reached out and took my hand, interlacing her fingers with mine. Her grip was strong. "Good," she said, "because the Lady Grace needs an oil change." "I'll put it on the schedule," I said, squeezing her hand. We stood there as the lights of the harbor flickered on, watching the water anchored by the weight of the machines we had saved and the silence we shared. People think it's the big moments that change everything. It's usually the maintenance. A wrench in the right place, a log sheet signed, a filter swapped before it fails. Valentina didn't need a speech from me, and I didn't need one from her. We kept showing up, kept the work honest, and kept the machines running. That's what held. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. We've got a lot more work to do.